Well, I am actually very excited to bring for your adoption our revamped reserve policy. As always, in all that we do, at the forefront of our minds are our mission, vision, and values. Reserves in particular are an important way for us to ensure that we meet our mission of connecting our community in a consistent, reliable, and safe way. The reserve policy for your adoption is a major overhaul of the previous policy. The new policy meets an important strategic tactic of our strategic business plan, which is community value. You might be wondering how reserves provide community value. Our value to the community is through the services that we offer, providing those services consistently, reliably, and in a quality and fiscally responsible way, especially when those services are most needed, provides great value to the community that we serve. Imagine the disruption if people could not safely and reliably get to work, to school, or to the grocery store during a recession or government shutdown. Or if buses were not available during emergencies to get people to needed services like cooling or respite centers. Imagine if service had to be reduced every time we had high inflation or the state made changes to our funding. Reserves are an important tool that eliminates or at least minimizes disruption to our vital services as a result of both foreseeable and unforeseeable events. There are three main reasons that you need to have a reserve fund. Reason number one is for unforeseen expenses or cash shortfalls. Reason number two is for replacement or repair of our assets and infrastructure. And reason number three is to be able to take advantage of unexpected opportunities, including competitive grants. Using that criteria, we recommend a reserve policy that designates 4 specific purpose reserve funds and the opportunity for the board to designate additional reserves as deemed necessary. The first 2 reserves are sustainable service reserves, and that's these 2 here. These reserves are for the purpose of maintaining consistent, reliable service levels that can weather economic downturns, high inflation, disasters, and emergencies. The cash flow reserve is to ensure adequate cash on hand to cover temporary cash flow shortages due to things like government shutdowns and other grant reimbursement delays. The capital reserve is to ensure we have adequate dollars to carry out the board-adopted community investment plan and to allow the district to take advantage of competitive grant opportunities. What if a competitive grant is available to pay to upgrade our fleet and reduce our maintenance costs, but like with most grants, requires the district to have funds to match? We would want to be able to have money in reserve to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. Lastly, our policy considers the need for other reserves for potential occurrences such as future liabilities, obligations, or maybe volatility in a major expenditure like fuel. In the next few slides, I will give a high-level summary of each of these reserves. The Sustainable Service Reserve has a minimum reserve requirement of 2 months of operating expenses plus operating transfers. 6 months is the aspirational or target reserve amount. We arrived at this reserve requirement by looking at our historical payroll tax or fare revenue declines since 2001, regardless of the reason. We then figured out what amount of reserve would have carried us through to the period of recovery. We also reviewed other transit agency reserve policies, as well as the Government Finance Officer Association best practices. The 2 to 6 months of reserve aligns with both best practices and what other transit agencies that have reserves policies do. I have included in your packet the information from other transit agencies and responses from the GFOA. I am recommending that we establish this reserve using fiscal year 21 payroll tax actuals that exceeded what was budgeted for. The STIF reserve is also a sustainable services reserve, but it is being established through the adopted STIF plan. Because the dollars used to fund this reserve are STIF funding, this reserve can only be used to maintain STIF funded operations. The amount in this reserve is based on what is adopted as part of the 2-year rolling STIF adopted plan. The cash flow reserve has a 60-day of operating expenses and operating transfers minimum. 90 days is the aspirational or target reserve amount. This reserve is a buffer for temporary cash flow shortages which occur due to grant reimbursement delays or government shutdowns. This reserve is a cash flow management tool. The district must still stay within the board appropriated budget. The cash flow reserve is strictly to address timing differences between expenditure and revenue receipt. I am recommending that this reserve be established using the fiscal year 21 beginning unrestricted fund balance. The capital reserve is the district's doing long-term planning. This reserve is to cover replacement or repair of our vehicles and infrastructure, as well as investments to keep our service safe, equitable, and reliable for the community, both now and in the future. This reserve is important because it allows us to maximize the community's dollars by taking advantage of competitive grant opportunities. The 20% of the 2-year community investment general fund reserve plan is a minimum to ensure that we are able to meet near-term match requirements. The target reserve balance reflects the needs identified in the 10-year community investment plan. I am recommending that this reserve be established using the fiscal year 21 beginning unrestricted fund balance in the capital fund. The last part of the reserve policy is to provide the board flexibility in designating specific reserves that the board deems prudent given probable risks identified. This last reserve category is up to board discretion as to the amount, how it is funded, and under what conditions it can be used. This flexible category can cover a reserve for a potential legal liability or to cover things like fuel price volatility as examples. This slide summarizes the 5 reserves covered in the revamped reserve policy. All reserves are in green because I have identified funding sources to meet the minimum reserve policy requirements. If you adopt this policy, you will see all of these reserves except the board designated one reflected in the fiscal year 2023 budget proposal. As always, thank you for your time, attention, and care for helping the district to continue to provide strong value to our community.
Thanks, Christina. And if anyone has questions, you can just call